Only in Kentucky could one county name a town after Yosemite in California, but pronounce it completely differently, and also claim to be the home of the largest apple pie in the world. Hi, I'm Michael, and I want to teach you a little bit more about Kentucky. One county at a time. All 120 of them. And today we're talking about Casey County. Casey County formed in 1807 from the western part of Lincoln County. It was named for Colonel William Casey, a Revolutionary War officer and early Kentucky frontiersman. If you've seen some of my videos before, you'll also know that he's the great-grandfather of Samuel Clemens, who you know as Mark Twain. The county seat is Liberty. In the winter of 1779, William Casey traveled west with other frontier families. They spent the season at Logan Station near present-day Stanford before moving toward the Green River country. In 1791, Casey built a fortification on Russell's Creek, and it became known as Casey's Station. Hunting, clearing land, and planting corn took most of the time. Families lived with the threats of raids and the uncertainty of early frontier seasons back then, but the settlement held, and new families began to drift in from the east. In 1807, the state legislature created Casey County. Liberty was chosen as the county seat, and the first courthouse was a log building set on the public square. By 1837, the community replaced the log structure with a brick courthouse. And that courthouse that stands today was completed in 1888 and 1889. It is a Romanesque brick building designed by the McDonald brothers out of Louisville. Heavy brickwork, a square clock tower, and arched windows that sit high above the square. And the building anchors a historic district with about 30 or more contributing structures. The Civil War years brought tension, but not really major battles to the county. Morgan's Raiders passed near the county line during their 1863 raid, but the fighting stayed outside Casey County. Still, many local men served. One of them was Silas Adams. Although he was born in Pulaski County, he was raised in Casey from the age of 2. He served as a Union cavalry captain, and after the war, he returned to Liberty, practiced law, and several years later served as a U.S. representative. He's best known for quoting scriptures during political arguments. Railroads reshaped the county after the Civil War. Yosemite, as it's pronounced, became the center of that shift. In the 1870s, Cincinnati industrialist Eugene Zimmerman bought more than 10,000 acres around Yosemite and staffed the operation with engineers, mill workers, and laborers from Casey County. He built salt mills at Yosemite and Staffordsville. And he also backed the Cincinnati and Green River Railroad, a narrow gauge line built through the region in the 1880s. The railroad hauled timber out of the knobs and created the only industrial corridor the county ever had. Yosemite grew into a rail town with mills, housing, and steady freight traffic. Other communities grew around the same time. Middleburg developed as a crossroads town with stores, mills, and a post office. Bethel Ridge grew along the northern ridges with churches that remain gathering places even today. Dunville formed near the South Fork. It held, again, stores, mill, farm supply businesses. I saw one person comment about a local ghost tale coming from that area. In the late 19th century, a tavern owner claimed to hear voices and see figures in an abandoned house. And later stories tied to the disturbances to buried remains found nearby. Clementsville is one of the oldest rural Catholic communities in Kentucky. Families began settling there in the early 1800s, and by the mid-century, they built a parish that became the center of community life. St. Bernard Catholic Church grew into an anchor institution surrounded by a school, cemetery, and farm families who stayed for generations. The community Phil sits east of Liberty. It had a long-standing post office and several farms that date back to the 19th century. Jackdown, Teddy, Penetralia, don't know if I'm pronouncing that one right, Creston, Windsor, Upper Tigert, and Walton grew from the same pattern. These are all names that I probably just butchered, but they were all pretty small communities. Casey County's economy through the early 20th century remained tied to the land. Families raised corn, hay, tobacco, cattle, and dairy cows. Orchards became important by the early 1900s. Families like the Ammermans planted apple trees across the hillsides, and at its peak, the county had tens of thousands of apple trees and ranked high in statewide production. That orchard history led to the tradition that defines Liberty today. The Casey County Apple Festival began in the 1970s, and the event attracts thousands. At the center of it all is the giant apple pie. It uses 50 bushels of Granny Smith apples, 100 pounds of sugar, 1.5 pounds of cinnamon, 75 pounds of cornstarch, 15 pounds of butter, 300 pounds of pastry, and it bakes for 12 hours at 350 degrees. Festival literature calls it the world's largest apple pie. Whether or not that can be proven, I don't know, but I saw a photo. It's a pretty big dang apple pie. The county had produced several notable figures outside of agriculture and politics. Wallace Wilkinson was born near Liberty in 1941. He built a statewide bookstore chain from scratch, parlayed that success into business investment, and later served as Kentucky's governor from 1987 to 1991. Clemensville produced Charles T. Wethington Jr., who served as the president of the University of Kentucky from 1990 to 2001. He oversaw campus expansions, hospital developments, and research investment. The county also shaped Crystal Wilkinson. She grew up on a rural farm in Casey County and became one of Kentucky's most respected authors. Her work explores Black Appalachian life through stories pulled directly from her grandparents, her church community, and her upbringing in the Knobs. She later became a Kentucky Poet Laureate. The railroad era faded into the 20th century. Timber supplies dwindled, the mills closed. Yosemite shrank to a quiet community. Liberty stayed the county's commercial center. One-room schoolhouses consolidated into larger schools. Most of the small post offices closed. The county's population held steady instead of growing. Agriculture remained the backbone. More than 1,000 farms still operate in the county today. The Amish and Mennonite communities near Dunville and South Fork sell produce, furniture, baked goods, and quilts. Their fall harvest actually draws large crowds and fits neatly into the county's long agricultural identity. The modern economy includes small manufacturing firms. Retail and healthcare services anchor Liberty. Many of the brick buildings that stood in the late 1800s still stand today. The downtown historic district keeps Liberty grounded in its past. Casey County also has a strong folklore tradition. Stories of the Woolly Booger, a Bigfoot-style creature said to cross roads while carrying livestock, circulate in the Knobs. One of the most widely repeated modern stories is a UFO incident involving local women who believed they lost time during a night drive. Newspapers covered it in the 1970s and 1980s, and the details shift depending on who tells it, but it remains part of the county's folklore. So, that's Casey County. What did I get wrong this time?